Talker here on IntellectualRadio.com, where we feed your brain. We had our first Reiki share yesterday at Journey to Wholeness Center in Oak Lawn, and it was quite successful. And I want to invite the listeners to IntellectualRadio.com to come down to Journey to Wholeness for our Reiki shares, because they're free events that allow you to experience Reiki firsthand. Reiki is a hands-on energy healing modality, and when you receive Reiki, it's an experience that only you can describe, because nobody has the same two experiences. And it gives you the opportunity to take in a large amount of energy that's of a healing nature so that you can help yourself work through issues, help you heal on a level that you are comfortable with healing and which you're prepared to heal, because you can't heal beyond what you're mentally, emotionally, energetically prepared for. So it's not something where you would get overwhelmed, but it would be exactly what you need at the time that you receive it. So our next free Reiki share is going to be on August 20th at noon at Journey to Wholeness in Oak Lawn. You can sign up online, or you can just come on in the day of and join us. And we'll be there to talk to you about what Reiki is. You'll be able to hear the experiences of other people who've had Reiki, as well as talk to the Reiki masters. We're the teachers. We teach you how to use Reiki to help yourself. And we're all there for that point in time, as well as afterwards. Give yourself the opportunity of trying to help yourself in a different way, as opposed to just taking medicine and going to the doctor. Holding two free guided meditations are really great opportunities for beginner meditators and advanced meditators to take them to another level of relaxation by allowing somebody else to lead them through the meditative process. My guided meditations are channeled meditations that come in from the angels, from people's spirits, from the ascended masters, and they come in and they help me lead everyone through the session, but they also bring in the energy that each particular person needs to have to be able to do whatever work is needed, whether it's healing work, whether it's releasing work. It is work that's conducted on a very high frequency with the angelics, with the ascended masters, and takes you to another level of meditation that you're not going to just get by meditating at home alone. You can read more about the work that I do at Journey to Wholeness at journeytowholeness.org. You can also sign up for my sessions. You can find out more about the open Reiki and the guided meditations. And if you're enjoying the topics that we're sharing here and the spiritual mentor, if you want to know more, or maybe you know somebody else who would be interested or could use this information, please share this topic, this information, this radio show here on IntellectualRadio.com with them so that they too can start to feed their brain. I welcome all comments and suggestions that are sent to me at thespiritualmentor@gmail.com. Talked a bit about that topic that really can't be adequately discussed in just a few sessions. And I received a number of questions, and I tried to put together the ones that seemed the most significant to answer today as best as I can without going too deep into it as well. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to read the question out loud, and then I'm going to give you the answer that I see is the best at this point in time. So the first question I picked was, you said there was a difference in how people behaved when a problem child attached to you versus somebody who was influenced by demonics. Can you give me some to him this? And of course, yes, I did. I knew that this one might show over it fairly, and it does deserve to have some clarification put in there. When somebody has a problem child attached to them, and this is a ghost that, for those who may not have caught the show last week, a problem child is a ghost who attaches to a person and then feeds off of that person for either a short period of time or a longer period of time. But it is a length of time where the person will feel sapped of their own energy. They're going to feel physically drained. They'll be unable to concentrate. And if the problem child stays attached for any significant amount of time, that person who is the problem child, their personality can seep over into the host. So if somebody who is the problem child had maybe anxiety issues and it attaches to somebody who may not really exhibit anxiety issues and they're attached for a length of time, the host then may start exhibiting anxiety issues that they never had before without really understanding why or where the anxiety is coming from. And it doesn't have to be anxiety. It can be a number of different personalities. I've encountered people who started talking, using words and phrases that they'd never really used before, but all of a sudden they were adding them into it. Different saying things. One person actually started developing an accent that was in another location, from another part of the U.S., and it was just one of those things where it's like most areas, when you live in them for your entire life, you develop the accent that's of that location. So when you all of a sudden you start developing an accent from another part of the country where you never lived, it's usually an indicator that there's something wrong. But in this particular case, the gentleman in question had traveled. When he'd come back home after a few months, he started talking in a very definitive accent. And he was somebody that I had known about, and he had came to me and asked me some questions, and we were able to get rid of it fairly quickly. But once I explained to him what it was, he started adding in all of these things. He figured that he was just tired because he'd done some business traveling. He figured that he was feeling a little rough around the edges because he hadn't had time to relax. I think the thing that really threw him off was the fact that people started commenting to him that his voice was changing, and he had not noticed that his voice was changing in and of itself. So he'd had a few indicators that he'd kind of brushed off, but then he finally came to one that he couldn't ignore. Another example is I had somebody come in to have work done. They'd never smoked cigarettes their entire life. All of a sudden, they started having these cravings to smoke. And it was one of the, he was very concerned about that because he didn't know what was happening, and he didn't want to start a habit that he firmly believed in that was bad for the body. And so we went through the process and we took care of the issue. But it's little things like that that you can push aside, whether it's eating too much all of a sudden, or sometimes getting anxiety or anger issues that come up for reasons that never came up before. It's little trigger things that you don't think about until they start to add up. They can sometimes be the indicator of the problem child. There is a difference between the problem children and the right, and I'm going to give you another example to help with this. I was called a few years ago by a woman who lived in, where was it? It was in the Midwest. I was still living in Raleigh at this point in time. And this woman was had received my information as a referral basis from somebody else that she had contacted. Her family was from Eastern Europe. And her son had gone back to visit family and relatives that he hadn't seen for many, many years since they had come over to the U.S. And when he'd gone over to Europe, he was just finishing up his first year of college. He was extremely excited about his studies. He had a job that he was looking forward to coming back to. But when he came back, he was completely changed. He was not the bright, talkative person that he was. Instead, he was very sullen. He was very angry. He would not communicate at all. He quit his job without even going back to it. He dropped out of school and just started manifesting these different personality changes that didn't seem to have any reason to have happened. Well, she ended up talking to him and telling him, because he started breaking furniture. He punched a few holes in the wall. His parents were very concerned, obviously. They were concerned about just his behavior in general, but he had younger siblings that he had started acting out towards as well. And so they didn't want to throw him out on the street because they really felt that there was something wrong. So when they contacted me, they told me that they were very concerned and that their option to move forward, if I couldn't help him, was to try to contact him and maybe get him into a mental health facility, to put him in a place where he could be sedated and possibly worked with. And so we had a very long conversation about that, because sometimes that's the worst thing that you can do, because by putting somebody into a fuzzy-headed mental state because of drugs, whether they're prescription or otherwise, actually undermines the person's self-will more than just leaving them in that state. The second problem about this situation is that he was over the age of 18. Once somebody hits the age of 18, they are considered an adult in the energetic community. They have free will at this point to decide if they're going to have care or if they're going to refuse care. And so while his mother brought me in to talk with him and try to explain to him the things that I had found attached to him, which were demonic in nature, apart from getting the story of what happened, he refused to participate with me in the conversation at all. And unfortunately, I have seen the situation that he entered into multiple times before and after his case. He had gone to a party with some of his friends and family members when he'd gone to Europe, and there were some recreational drugs that they were participating in. Now, I'm not putting a judgment out there on recreational anything. However, I will state that when you take certain types of recreational drugs, or even prescription drugs, or alcohol, or anything that takes you anywhere out of the body and into the etheric, this can be a problem. And that's exactly what happened. He took something that pushed him way out onto the etheric. He had a trip, or he had a visit out there, whatever the correct vernacular for it is. And he became the blue light special at Kmart's out there. And several things glommed onto him that were very bad. And as a result, he had this severe personality disorder. And it really was severe. And in the problem child case, it's little things that start to pick up and accelerate and feeling drained. Whereas when you're under the influence of the demonics, it can really, really change your behavior, and it can change it very rapidly. Now, the difference here between a regular person having demons attached to them in the human environment here is that they have to attach to different wounds. When you go out into the etheric, you're completely vulnerable. You have nothing that's your normal personality to help prevent rapid, deep integration of the demonics into you. So that's why his changes occurred much more rapidly than somebody who perhaps over 20 years might start to exhibit those ugly behaviors. I had just like that. He was a really scholarship kid in Raleigh. His mom had contacted me through our Reiki community there. He and she had both taken Reiki up through 2nd degree, and they understood energy. Had been going to one of his in the States on scholarship, very bright kid, gone out to a party, thought he was getting one thing, ended up he went on, somebody gave him something else that was either spliced into what he thought he was taking or something. I'm sorry, I'm really ignorant about that stuff. All I know is the length of time. He was very talkative about it. And so he explained what he went through in that, which to me sounded like he'd actually been given something like acid. And we talked about what he experienced up there, because he could actually tell me more about the shapes and the beings that he saw in the etheric that were coming at him, that had attached to him. And it was a very difficult work situation to deal with, because anytime I tried to work with him and do anything to help relieve his particular situation, the demons that were attached to him sent excruciating pain through his body. And so he would end up curled in a little ball, crying and screaming, and I'm like, this isn't going to work. You're going to have to take slower steps to get to the point where I can help you, but you have to redevelop your strength of will. You need to give yourself Reiki every day, which is always a great thing to do, because it's bringing in the energy of the Creator. It's bringing in the energy that the angels resonate with, and the demons don't. They don't like that. And so on one hand, you have to build yourself up by bringing in this other energy, but on the other hand, you have to have the strength of, no, we're not going to deal with you anymore. You're going away. And it's a combination that has to be done by the person. And in this case, it would have been a little bit more successful, I think, over time, if he had not allowed himself to feel the pain so acutely. That's something that a lot of people don't understand, and which it's taken some very severe experiences that I've had with clients to help them understand, is that when you're having the impression, let's say, that your arm is on fire, and you feel the fire on your skin, and it feels like your skin is crackling underneath the fire, and it feels like it's reaching down into the bone, and you look at your arm and you can tell that your arm, then you have to be able to assert yourself and say, I am not putting any energy into this illusion that you are sending to me. I am taking my body back. There's various things that you can do, but if the person doesn't have the strength of will, even though they can see the physical evidence that there's nothing going on with their body, there's really not a whole lot that you can do about it until they are actually ready to get to the point where they want to move forward with it. In regards to heavily influenced and full body possession, most people generally don't exhibit signs of full body possession right off the bat, because the demons are very clever. And so they don't expose these severe personality disorders. They don't cause pain right away, because their whole process is involved in having the host trust them, to convincing the host that they're the only one that the host can trust, to convincing the host that they love them and they want only the best for them. And then once they have ensnared themselves within the psyche, within the energy fields, within the energy body, then they start to revert to their natural state of being and start with personality changes and drive people away and other things that go along with it. When a demon is in possession or is in a position of power, the demon then pushes the host into these actions that pleases the demon, regardless of what the host wants. So we're back to behaviors and things that the person might not normally exhibit, doing things that they might not ever have thought about doing before, all with the intent and purpose that the demon has, not necessarily the person. Then, once the demon has achieved these levels of attaching at a deeper and a deeper level, increasing the influence that it has over the individual, then it can work forward towards what its plans are. And, you know, it happens to people of all different ages, and I do want to emphasize that again. You do not have to be an adult for the demons to attach to you. You don't have to be a teenager for the demons to attach you. I've worked with a number of people who had demons attached to them from a small child age. I had a client who acquired a very significant demon before he was 10 years old. And he was of the nature that he actually knew was attached to him. And the demon, when I came into his life, he was in his late teens, early 20s. And he had had that demon with him for over 10 years. And he considered the demon to be his best friend. And I was like, explain that one to me. How can you consider this to be the situation? And he said the demon loved him, and the demon had helped him over the years, and that he had, experienced things that he wouldn't have experienced if the demon had not been attached to him. Well, this is true. The demon did attach to him at a very young age, and it had convinced the small child that he was, that he cared for him. But then as the child got older and hit the teenage years, he had had a number of instances where he'd actually gone, been arrested for things that he had done. And one of the things that he did was help the boy acquire girlfriends in such a way that the demon would actually access the target's mindset, what the target wanted in a boyfriend, what the target's expectations were. He would feed the information into the boy would transform himself into whatever it was that the girl wanted. If she wanted somebody romantic, he would be romantic and write poems for her. He would do, oh my God, he did so many weird things because that was what he felt he needed to do to get to the girl. And the cases where he was arrested generally were because the parents came forward and said that he had raped their daughter. Consent, the age of consent, is a law. And he targeted girls who were 14 and 15 years old, even after he had reached the age of maturity of 18 and could be sent to jail because of those actions. But he did not allow himself to see that these actions that the demon had convinced him were okay to do were bad. They were harmful to somebody else. He just knew that when he did them, the demon would flood his body with certain vibrations and feelings, and he would feel rewarded for doing the behaviors that the demon wanted him to do. And during the process of these interactions, the demon would feed off the pain of the girl, the emotional and physical and mental pain of the girl, while the boy, he would feed off of the other emotions that he was getting at the opposite spectrum. So he was double teaming this boy and his girlfriends. In this particular case, the demon actually enjoyed pain. And he liked to inflict the pain. And so with the girls, it was not a pleasant situation in any case. All in all, it was a really bad situation. And the worst part about it is the boy's family had money. And so he got bought out of going to jail or juvie or any of those other things by the family, who just kept throwing money into the situation. And he might go to therapy for a few months, but then it'd be like he would tell the therapist everything the therapist wanted to hear because the demon would know what they wanted to hear. And so he was a very smooth operator, I guess you could say, because he would just tell people exactly what they wanted to know, but then he would revert back to the behavior within a fairly short time because that's what the demon wanted. There was no learning here. He didn't learn. He didn't grow from these terrible experiences into something more. He stayed in this one particular mindset because that's where the demon kept him. This particular type of demon is not the normal demon that most people will encounter. It was a very high-level demon. It was what we called the seraphim class. And it is a very intelligent demon, and it's very selective of the people that it attaches to. And so the average person has multitudes of demons that are attached to the wounds, whereas this one was a very specific one that had attached to him at a very young age and kept all the other demonics that did attach to him. It was the sole influencer of the child. Let's move on. Question number 2. Does having a demon attached to you mean that God has forsaken you? No, 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 no. You're not being punished. You're not being punished by God by having demons attached to you. I'm going to reiterate the basic premise that God loves you no matter what. God saw the entirety of the life that you could have, including having the demons attached to you and influencing you. And God still gave you the stamp of approval to come down here, to get into this body, and to live this life, knowing full well that your life, any number of forks in the road, and you could do good, you could do bad, you could do nothing, and it was still approved. The demons are not a punishment for you. And that is really significant for me to say, I think, because when I do the work that I do, I've never seen anything that would indicate punishment or anger. In fact, I work with the angelics, when I work with people and I cleanse them of these demons and things like that, and there's nothing but absolute love, total love and support that is always there, always present for the person, regardless of how isolated and alone that they feel. And so I just really want to state, the demonics serve a purpose, and so don't think that you're being punished because of anything that you might have done, whether you remember it or not, because they're attached to you. That is nothing to do with it at all. Question number 3. Is it okay to speak to ghosts if I can see them? Well, I don't recommend it. It's a loaded question, though. When I'm teaching my students about this aspect of the work, I do not encourage them to speak to the discarnates, because the main purpose of our work, of our vocation, is to get them moved from this plane of existence to the next. And when you start having conversations with them, that provides them with energy, that creates another energetic system that needs to be cleared away so that they can be moved on. The thing about it that I would emphasize is I get a lot of people who think that ghosts and things like that are what happens in the movie The Sixth Sense. That if somebody sees ghosts, that there's some purpose that they have to fulfill to help that ghost move on. That is not the case. And the problem with that is, if you really think that that is the case for you, you're most likely going to create a scenario where a demon is going to attach to you by pretending that it's a ghost and you need to help it. And believe me when I say, the demons are very clever, and they can read your mind, and they can read who you are and everything that there is about you, and they can make you believe things that you wouldn't think that you could believe. It's just one of those things where it's better to leave the genie in the bottle than to bring it out and deal with a mess of stuff that you might not possibly be able to handle. I would like to state one thing, is I have battled with people before about the ghost situation. In particular, I was part of a community in Raleigh that I was invited into that was a group of people who considered themselves ghost hunters. They would go to locations, they had all their scientific equipment, and they would go have whatever experience they had. And I was invited to join this group by one of the participating members because she knew of what I did. And I enjoyed the forum for a little while, but in the end, I ended up being blocked by the owner of the forum, the man who was the lead person in this group, because he had some ego issues, because I started getting more questions than he did about the ghost, because I had a lot more extensive hands-on experience with them than he did. But also he got irritated with me because I stated quite clearly that the purpose of noticing them and helping is to help them move on, to get rid of them, whereas he actually wanted to just document them and make money off of them. He wanted to be able to sell the ghost tours. He wanted to be able to write books and stories about ghosts. And I mean, before you sit there and say, well, that's not a bad idea, I just want to give you a way to look at it. Let's just say your grandma dies. You loved your grandma. Grandma was a good person to you. Grandma dies. Now, let's just say that grandma doesn't pass on. She decides to stay here and watch over the family, because that's what grandma did. She was a nurturing person, and she cared about you. Now, do you really want some creep discovering grandma and then milking her, being a ghost, to make money for himself? Because that's what this is all about. all these people who are ghosts were somebody's loved one at some point in time. And for whatever reason that they didn't pass on, they're still here. It doesn't mean that they are insignificant and unworthy of respect. It doesn't mean that you can just come in and pretend that there's a story about them and tell people about it to make money. It doesn't mean that you can just keep using them and basically pimping them out for some kind of, exciting, event for somebody for some night. And I want you to take that again on that personal level. Is this really something that you would want Grandma to experience if she died and you knew that she was here? Would you want somebody to treat her in that way? I have a very stringent set of ethics. This is my vocation. This is what I do, and I teach my ethical standards to my students. Once they're done and they go out there, I don't have any control over it, but I'm very particular about the people who I take as students, so they're well aware of my standards before they ever get into this program that I teach. But the very first thing is you never leave yourself vulnerable to anything that's detrimental. And by putting yourself emotionally into a situation with the discarnates can leave you vulnerable. You see them, you take care of them, you move on. That's it. I really don't recommend that anybody try to dig into that situation deeper. Oh, my favorite. Question number 4. Can't demons be our friends? Can't they work with us and become our friends and helpers? I'm not sure watching movies or playing video games, but no, demons aren't people. They are constructs that do not have the range people do. Humans have a huge range of emotions, from the negative to the positive, and all kinds of nuanced layers in between. People also learn. People have experiences. Those experiences help you grow, and when you grow, you make decisions based off, the next decisions based off those experiences. Demons don't have emotions. Demons do not have the ability to grow beyond their programming. And it's really the way that they're made. It's not that it's a challenge for you to go out there and try to help them understand that they're doing something wrong. Responsibility, try to educate them up so that they have a higher state of emotional maturity. It's one of those things that you have to understand, that a demon is a particular type of being that's made in a mold, that mold does not break away and grow. Let's make it more clinical. Think of a demon as a computer. Computers run on programs that tell them to do this if that is done. Humans look at a situation and they put their emotional context and parameters on this, and then they figure out what they want to do. Okay, demons are humans. They don't have feelings to sway them. They don't have ideas of right or wrong for them to balance out their judgments or their decisions. Some demons can be excruciatingly evil and do horrible things with the people they're attached to, while others are just an annoying kind of evil, and you just kind of ignore them. There's so many different kinds, and when they attach to you, they're attaching to your emotional wounds inside of you. And let me give you a better example of that. Do you remember being 5 or 6 years old, perhaps being in school, and there was somebody who didn't want to play with you? There was some kid over there that wouldn't play with you, and they started maybe making the other kids not play with you because they were the popular kid, and maybe they even called you names. Maybe you went and told the teacher, and what did the teacher do? Probably just told you to go play by yourself or to think about something else and ignore them. You go home and you tell your parents about it, and they're like, well, did you try to be a friend? I mean, that's the #1 rule. You've got to be a friend, to make a friend, and all those crazy things that parents tell children when they have no clue what they're saying altogether. And so now you've taken in the idea that you don't know how to be a friend, that you're not worthy of having friends. At the age of 5 or 6, kids are vicious, and they say things and do things without thinking about long-term repercussions. And so that kid probably didn't think about you a week after saying hateful things to you, but you have taken in the idea that there's something wrong with you. You have unworthiness issues that are deep inside of you, and the correct demon that resonates with that vibration is going to attach to you, not to help you get better, No. They're going to feed off of you. They're going to stimulate that feeling of unworthiness, because the more they stimulate your feeling of unworthiness, the more that you give them to feed off of. So you have a wound. The demon is attached to you, and you need to get past that. And the only way to spontaneously remove the demons is to heal the emotional wounds that you carry inside of you. And that's the last thing that they want you to do. Demons aren't going to help you. They don't grant wishes. They don't wave fairy magic wands and you well or make you rich or make you popular or any of those kinds of things that you might fantasize about in your head. They're never going to care about you. They're never going to really be your friend, and they're not going to love you. And so in response to the question, no, they're never going to be your friend. They're never going to help you. And if you get into a dialogue with one, you need to really keep that in mind, because some of them are incredibly persuasive. And you just have to keep in mind that the basic nature of these energetic beings is negative. Question number 5. Can somebody send you demons if they get mad at you? Well, this is a complex question because when somebody gets mad at you, there are certain energetic things that they can send to you, especially if they don't have any respect for you. There's situations also with modalities like voodoo, where certain participants can create situations where things can get attached to you and can very negatively affect you. I've had to deal with some voodoo situations in the past. It's not a pretty situation. But in general, that's very, very, very rare. Most likely when somebody gets mad at you, they just send you lots of negative energy, which can screw with you. Don't get me wrong. It can screw with you, but it's not, 99% of the time, it is not a demon that's been sent to you. Question number 6. Can my free will prevent demons and other things attaching to me? Well, it depends, and it's a complex situation because it's not just free will. It's what is the basis that your free will is coming off of. If your basis for making your decisions in life are based off of your being rich, being well off, being popular, being superficial things that are about greed and avarice, and likely that your free will is going to keep anything detrimental from you, because these types of things are a reflection of insecurities that you portray. People who have this great desire to accumulate large amounts of wealth have an issue inside of them where they don't see the self-worth, they don't see the worth of other people inside of them, and so they've latched onto the idea that things give value. A person is judged for their value and contribution to society by how many things that they have. This is not a spiritual way of being, and if you operate at that level, you're going to just attach things to you that aren't good for you. And so try to think of it in the way that the free will choices that you make, if it's based off of compassion, if it's based off of kindness, not being a doormat, but by approaching things from a level of where you respect those around you, those kinds of decisions are not going to bring negative things to you. When you act out of fear, you bring those things to you. It's just really very simple on some levels, but it's a real step for some people to understand. Number 7, can you please give me a better understanding of how a person acts when they've been possessed or are about to be possessed? This is complex, but I'm going to give you some indicators that I have noticed are very consistent with all of the people that I have dealt with over the years. They're not necessarily in a particular order of manifestation, but they are usually present hand in hand. First is emotional coldness, lack of emotion, almost robotic in the fact that they don't have empathy and compassion or feelings for other people. The people in their family, in their life, in their relationships can notice that they no longer put into the relationship what they might have done in the past. And it isn't so much that the person has decided the relationship is over. They keep going through the motions, but there's nothing there. There's no love, there's no feeling behind the actions. And it's one of the ways that people are driven away from the host, which is what the demon wants. Sometimes radical changes in perspective without cause happen. So if there's been no traumatic kind of event in the person's life, but all of a sudden they flip 90 degrees or 180 degrees on stances that they've had or beliefs that they've had all of their life, this is an indicator that something is influencing them, because people just don't flip on a dime without something happening. And if there haven't been any life circumstances that cause that person to think differently, then there's an internal motivator that's influencing that person. Radical personality behavior changes, like somebody who was introverted before becoming very extroverted, and somebody who was extroverted becoming introverted. Again, without any kind of outside traumatic stimulation, outside events happening, it's again an internal motivator. And there's both ways that this works in the demon's favor. If you used to be extroverted and now you're introverted, this is where the demon is sequestering you and isolating you and driving away those that you loved. If you're becoming extroverted from being introverted, the chances are the demon is going to energetically pull the people to you that it wants to use for its own purposes. And so the category of people that you would draw to you aren't necessarily going to be of the category that you used to have. My favorite, when you walk by somebody and they're having a conversation and it's totally, you hear a complete conversation on their part, like they're talking on the phone to somebody, except there's no phone. There's no place that this person is having nobody that they could have a conversation with. They're not Skyping, they're not on the phone. They are just having this complete conversation in their head. This is different from people talking to themselves. I've talked to myself for years. These are detailed conversations, and the more influenced the person becomes, their side of the conversation can actually be very sad and pleading and pitiful, and it's very difficult to live through, to watch. I have done it multiple times with people when they weren't aware that I was in their space. And so when you see that, you have to step back a little bit and go, what is the situation? Because you can have a conversation with yourself, but there's different energetic overtones when you are dealing with a demon conversation. For people over the age of 35, the high-level influence usually develops behaviors regarding like paranoia, victimhood. Schizophrenia generally develops in male and females before the age of 25. So if you have somebody over the age of 35, closer to 40, who all of a sudden is talking about how they are out to get them, or they've been told this or that, they are receiving information but yet don't want to reveal to you their mysterious sources who are giving them this information, this is usually, to me, a very strong indicator that this person is very highly influenced and they're going towards that verge of actually full possession. The sad part about it is these people have a very strong tendency of being strong-willed, intelligent people who think that they're capable in handling everything, and they honestly think that they're veering off into some kind of mental psychosis. So they don't want to tell anybody about it because demons aren't real and things aren't real, so they just must be losing it. So they're not going to necessarily go out and seek help because they'll have gone already to Google and other places and looked up all of the mental illness sites and figured out that they've got something wrong with them, when it's actually very much the opposite, with the demons preying on them. Full body possession isn't a fun situation. And really, when you're encountering somebody who is exhibiting all of these different traits, I would say you need to be very careful, because the full body situation is probably fairly imminent, because the demon has taken over the majority of the person's personality and is now working into the physical activation stage. So you may want to look at it very carefully if you have a partner or a spouse, or even the children noticing the parent behaving this way. Please be careful, because once the host cannot fight the demon any longer at all, this is going to be very difficult to watch because the physical transformation is then going to take place. For those who are questioning a situation that's already in their life, again, I would just say look into the eyes. They say the eyes are the windows of the soul, but in my perspective and my experience, there's a very definite difference between somebody who is a possessed human and there's the demon looking out of them versus somebody who's just human. I don't care how troubled they are not going to have the eyes of somebody that has the demon looking out at them. Okay, so one last tip for anybody who really feels that they may have a situation like this and they don't know what to do. I would suggest very strongly, even if you have absolutely no spiritual or religious beliefs whatsoever, even if you don't believe in angels or anything of that ilk, to just call on Archangel Michael, because he is the slayer of demons. This is one of his primary jobs on this plane. I never used to believe in angels. We'll talk about that next week. But I learned a lot of different things through my own experiences. And while Michael may not be able to prevent that person from being possessed because they've given away their power, they can help you protect you. Because people who are physically possessed don't care about your physical state, your emotional state, your mental state. They don't care. So if you're ever in question and you need some instant support, call on Michael, because he's everywhere. He's a multidimensional being that's designed very specifically on this earth plane for this type of work. So this is Julia Knickerbocker, and this has been the Spiritual Mentor on IntellectualRadio.com, where we feed your brain. And I thank you for joining me today. Next Monday at 4 p.m., we're going to go to the flip side. We're going to talk about angels. We're going to talk about spirit guides, ascended masters, hopefully a little more upbeat of a topic as opposed to the darkness that is. You can only hear this information on IntellectualRadio.com, where we feed your brain. Please check out my website at spiritualmentor.org. I am ArchangelAriel.com and ShreddingTheDarknessWithin.org. You can also find my information on Facebook under the Spiritual Mentor. As always, send me your questions and suggestions to thespiritualmentor@gmail.com. And coming up next is The Drive at 5 with Roman, so keep listening to IntellectualRadio.com, where we feed your brain. This is the Spiritual Mentor. Have a blessed week.